Another factor that can affect the photosynthesis is leaf structure. Now, plant leaves have complex structure with layers of different tissues containing specially adapted cells. Now, this is a cross section of a leaf plant. All right, it's something like I have a leaf over here. I have cut the thicker side of the leaf, and this is the magnified cross section version of the plant. They have complex structure. For example, we have the first structure, which is known as cuticle. Cuticle is a waxy layer around the structure of a leaf which prevents it from wilting, which prevents water loss, and it's a kind of a protecting layer on leaves. Then we have the upper epidermis on the upper side of the leaves. In between, we have these spongy mesophyll cells. We have these palisade mesophyll cells, which would be discussed in detail in the later chapters. We have vascular bundles, we have bundle sheath cells, and we have a lower epidermis. So this is the lower side of the leaf, and this is the upper side of the leaf. These cells, which have these air spaces in between them, are called spongy mesophyll cells. And these cells, which are tightly packed with each other, they do not have air spaces between them. They have more amounts of chloroplast. These black figures are actually chloroplast. These are called palisade mesophyll cells. The table below describes the different structures in a leaf and their functions. Let's see what the table has to say. This is another diagram of a leaf cross section. All right, this is the upper epidermis, and this is the lower epidermis. We know that the first layer we have is a waxy cuticle on top, and we have a waxy cuticle on the lower side of the leaf as well. Now, on the upper side, we would have upper epidermis. On lower side, we would have lower epidermis. Then we have these air spaces. And I told you the cells having air spaces are actually called spongy mesophyll cells. The cells not having air spaces between them, containing higher number of chloroplasts trapped in a regular pattern, are called palisade mesophyll cells. Now on the upper and lower side, we have these guard cells, which are actually responsible for opening and closing of stomata or singular stoma. Now stomata are tiny openings present on the lower side and the upper side of the leaf, both which are actually responsible for the absorption of carbon dioxide, the release of oxygen, and mainly as humans have lungs and nostrils for gas exchange, plants have structures called stomata for gaseous exchange that can either be through transpiration, through diffusion, and whatever. We have guard cells on the lower side as well. The mesophyll photosynthetic cells contain both the spongy mesophyll and the palisade mesophyll. But we know these palisade mesophyll cells are tightly packed. These spongy mesophyll cells have air spaces between them, even though the both are having the role of trapping light energy and carrying out photosynthesis. Other than that, we have veins. Whenever you see a plant leaf, you must have noticed these veins on a plant, they are actually known as vascular bundles. These veins are actually responsible for the transportation of food, glucose, sucrose, salts, sugars, water around the plant and the leaf. Over here, I have a mechanism of stomata, carbon dioxide going inside the leaf, oxygen coming outside the leaf. Why? Because photosynthesis needs carbon dioxide. Once the photosynthesis is completed, oxygen comes out as a waste product. So this is the main structure of leaf. Got it?
Yes, sir.
We have different functions. I already told you them orally. Now let's see important thing to note down. The waxy cuticle. What is it? A protective layer on top of the leaf which prevents water from evaporating. Of course, imagine putting a rubbery layer, a thin waxy layer on something. Of course, the water inside the leaves would not be lost in the environment. It would not evaporate. And then we have the upper epidermis, thin and transparent to allow light to enter the palisade mesophyll cells layer underneath. Why? Because keep the diagram in mind. We have the upper epidermis over here. Okay, the light energy passes through the epidermis, and right below the epidermis we have these palisade mesophyll cells. For example, in the diagram below, this is the upper epidermis. As soon as the light energy enters, it goes inside these palisade mesophyll cells, which are right underneath the upper epidermis. Palisade mesophils, now column-shaped cells tightly packed with chloroplast. Now these are the cells which are directly present underneath the epidermis. These have chloroplast inside them, and these chloroplasts are responsible for trapping light energy in order to carry out photosynthesis and nutrition of the plant. They are column shaped. As I told you, they are tightly packed. They do not have air spaces between them. They are in a regular pattern, maximizing photosynthesis by absorbing more light, having a lot of chloroplasts and chlorophyll. Then we have underneath those spongy mesophyll cells. Now, what is spongy mesophyll cells responsible for? They contain internal air spaces that increases the surface area to volume ratio for the diffusion of gases, mainly carbon dioxide. How do they do that? Let me tell you. For example, these air spaces have more amount of carbon dioxide present, or you can say these air spaces. Let me draw these spongy mesophyll cells. Now you see the air spaces between them. They have lower amount of carbon dioxide inside the leaf. This is the lower epidermis. Now inside the environment we have higher amounts of carbon dioxide. Now what would happen? Due to this difference in the concentration gradient, the CO2 would move from higher to lower inside the leaf. They contain internal air spaces that increases the surface area to volume ratio for the diffusion of gases, mainly carbon dioxide. So they provide a roughly a larger, a more spacey area. They have a lot of space. They have wide air spaces in order to maximize surface area. And if you remember, surface area, more the surface area, higher the rate of diffusion. Hence, more carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the plant. So if you see, light is being absorbed over here, the CO2 is being absorbed over here. Both light and CO2 is needed by for the photosynthesis. Then we have lower epidermis containing guard cells and stomata. We have openings which are known as stomata. These guard cells are actually bean shaped, which are actually responsible for the opening and closing of stomata. These are the guard cells, one and two, and this is called stomata. It's the gaseous exchange organ of a plant. All you need to know: for the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, we have stomatal openings, upper and lower epidermis of a plant. These guard cells absorb and loses water to open and close the stomata to allow carbon dioxide to diffusion and oxygen to diffuse out. Of course, carbon dioxide will diffuse inside the plant, oxygen will diffuse outside the plant. Stomata is where gas exchange takes place, opens during the day. Why does it open during the day? Because it needs to absorb CO2 for photosynthesis. Closes during the night. Why does the stomata close during the night? Because it does not need to absorb CO2 anymore. Why? Because light is not present at night. There is no sunlight. What's the point of absorbing CO2 when you can't carry out photosynthesis without light energy? Evaporation of water also takes place from here in most plants, found in much greater concentration on the underside of the leaf to reduce water loss. These stomatas are also responsible for the evaporation of water. Some plants have lower number of stomata. Why? For example, desert plants such as cactus have less stomata. Why do they have less stomata? So less water is lost from the plant. So cactuses can store as much as water inside them and lose a little amount of water to the surroundings. Then we have vascular bundles which contain two vessels known as xylem and phloem. Now this xylem is responsible for the transport of water and the phloem is responsible for the transport of sucrose in the form of food. Xylem transports water into the leaf for mesophyll cells. Of course, the water is transported by the xylem to the cells. Why? Because water is needed for photosynthesis. So if you see all of these things, the light energy is absorbed by the palisade mesophyll cells. The CO2 is absorbed by the guard cells and stomata. The water is brought to the cells through xylem vessels, and all these light energy, CO2 and H2O are raw materials for photosynthesis. Phloem is responsible for transportation of sucrose and amino acids around the plant. Why? Because the products of photosynthesis are in the form of food needed by for the plant. Hence, it needs to be transported through phloem. So, xylem and phloem are both present in vascular bundle. Xylem is responsible for the transport of water, whereas phloem is responsible for the transport of sucrose and amino acids around the plant. We have a large diagram explaining everything over here. We have the lower epidermis, the upper epidermis, the palisade mesophyll cells. Underneath those, we have spongy mesophyll cells, then lower epidermis, guard cells, air spaces, vascular bundles, chloroplasts, and we all know the function epiepidermis, light energy, palisade mesophyll tissue, photosynthesis, spongy mesophyll tissue, providing large surface area for the more absorption of CO2, lower epidermis containing also responsible for gas exchange and evaporation. Then we have guard cells for gas exchange, CO2 inside, oxygen outside. These air spaces provide a concentration gradient for exchange of gases. Vascular bundles, we have xylem, we have phloem, phloem for food and sucrose, xylem for the transportation of water. Chlorophyll is for trapping the light energy. They contain these chloroplasts which trap light energy. And this is the whole structure of leaf we need to know. So this is what we typically think of when we think of a plant cell, but it's just one of the types of cells found in the leaf because there are many kinds of plant cells. We have epidermal plant cells, we have guard cells, we have palisade mesophyll cells, we have spongy mesophyll cells. So right now I'm just looking at 5 to 6 types of plant cells inside one uh, leaf, a cross section of a leaf. We have total of 5 to 6 different types of plants that are responsible for different functions. Got it? Moving on. Other than that, there were some adaptations of plant leaves for photosynthesis as well. The specialized cells in leaves have adopted features which allow them to carry out a particular function in the plant. For example, large surface area. I already told you large surface area means more the surface area, more the diffusion, more will be the carbon dioxide absorbed. Increases surface area for the diffusion of carbon dioxide and absorption of light for photosynthesis. Higher absorption of carbon dioxide and more absorption of light. So plants have this property of large surface area. The second property of a leaf is that leaves are thin. How does it help? Allows carbon dioxide to diffuse through palisade mesophyll cells quickly. Because if you remember, we know that longer the distances, slower would be the diffusion. Hence, if a leaf is thin, which means shorter distance, higher would be the diffusion. So being thin allows carbon dioxide to diffuse through palisade mesophyll cells in a faster speed through diffusion. The third feature of a plant is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is responsible for absorbing light energy so that photosynthesis can take place. Then we have a network of veins inside plants, which is xylem, phloem, vascular bundles, transportation of water, leaf, carbohydrates, products of photosynthesis. Okay, the products of photosynthesis would be transported through phloem. The water would be transported through xylem. Then we have the fifth feature of a plant, which is known as stomata. Again, responsible for gas exchange, carbon dioxide into the leaf, oxygen out of the leaf. Epidermis. It's thin and transparent, allows more light to reach the palisade mesophyll cells because the leaves are thin and hence they allow more light to reach the palisade mesophyll cells. We have the thin cuticle. What does it help a plant? To protect the leaf without blocking sunlight. It's a protective covering layer for the leaf. Palisade cells layer at the top of the leaf. Why are palisade mesophyll cells at the top of the leaf? Why not on the leaf? Because the upper side is the upper side of the leaf is the one facing the sunlight, which maximizes the absorption of light as it will hit chloroplasts in the cells directly. How does the spongy layer help the leaf? Air spaces allow carbon dioxide to diffuse through the leaf, increasing surface area. So basically, carbon dioxide would be more absorbed once the surface area is also more. So you have to memorize all these different adaptations of the plant. Then we have vascular bundles. How do they help? How do they adopt? Thick cell walls of the tissues in the bundles help to support the stem and the leaf. These vascular bundles have thick cellulose lignified walls because they have to anchor the plant. They have to keep the plant upright position so the plant does not wilt or fall off. There's a process called wilting because the plant is not having a strong stem, hence it wilts.